All right, so we are in the middle of November, and I'm in my Nanchos bee yard. The storm has passed, and the whole thing of feeding has now become even more significant as we try to navigate the whole process of overwintering. Colonies are going to be challenged as against what would happen on a normal year. Sometimes on a normal year, I'll be breeding a couple of colonies at this time. However, that has to be curtailed. I grafted the first week of November, I grafted 20 queens and I set them up. And there has been a lot of robbing going on since the storm. You know, it's a struggle really to breed colony in Jamaica, especially in St. Mary at this time. Normally, on a normal year, as I said earlier, we'd be allowed to breed queens, but and to develop young colonies, but it is going to be far more challenging this year. The degree of difficulty is going to be far more significant. So curtailing the ambitions has to be a critical component of the beekeeping industry. A few things I'd want to say here as well as it relates to sharing a few tips is that one of the things that we need to, or we should have done already, is to identify the queens that have been underperforming and eliminate those queens and re-establish that colony with new queen. If you have not done that already though, what it would mean is that you might still need to identify those queens, because your resources will be lost if you allow it to go, those queens to, and those colonies with poor queens to progress any further. One of the things that might happen is that that colony will die, you potentially might lose those resources. So merging would be a good thing to do now with the underperforming queen, just to pinch them and merge the colonies so that the stronger colonies, you can put those resources onto those stronger colonies, whether in a deep on top, or add to the 4-frame, 5-framers that are stronger and progressing and need a couple frames. You can move those across your entire outfit. So it is important for you to go through and to identify the colonies with underperforming queens. One of the things I would recommend this year do, as I share these tips, one of the things I would recommend is that you continue to pull brood from the strong ones to give to the weaker ones, because there's not a lot of food. On a normal year, when we go through a normal year, it would be easy to do that at this time. However, because of the storm and the severity of the storm, then what it does is that it has rendered that tactic useless, because if you take colonies from the strong ones at this time, they might be struggling to build back themselves to overwinter sufficiently so that you can do what you should be doing. What I'd recommend is that you feed those bees, those colonies, you feed them in a strategic way to sort of build the colony quickly. Because if you look here, all right, so we have a number of coconut trees at this apiary. So here we have a number of coconut trees, which is just a rich source of pollen, and they are actually flowering now like crazy. So it's a rich source of pollen. So this apiary has enough to survive, especially the smaller colonies, the 3-framers, the 2.5, the 4 frames, all of that. They have a better survival opportunity, so they might be able to overwinter much better than other areas. So that's a plus. I'm actually feeding now, and I'm feeding with 1-to-1. If you look here, this is how I do my feeding. I put them in bags, and then I use this little instrument to give the bags like about 5 small holes. So we have a nigger at this end. I hope you are seeing the needle. We have a needle at the end of this. you should be able to see the needle point. So we push it all the way down into the wood until it leaves just a little part of the needle out, and the needle has to be fine. So that is what we do, and then you puncture the bag, give the bag a little pick. I give them four to five holes, tiny holes, based on the strength of the apron. For the smaller ones, I just give them like 2 holes or 3 holes, so that the bee can suck them out accordingly. So then the next tip I'd want to share is that you remove all frames from colonies that are not covered. So once the frame is not properly covered with bees, I'd recommend that you move those. Those are source for mite, for maltbot. So once you have those, then those bats are going to lay the malt egg in it, and you're going to find the colony getting messy, colony getting weak, and sometimes the colony die. And a lot of times, once the malt buds start to take up these colonies, then the ant will follow shortly after. And once the ant take over, then the bees are going to abscond. So it is important for you to pay close attention to your colonies. I use a 7 to 10 days visiting cycle. For right now, that is challenging because of what the storm has done. So you still have a lot of cleaning up to do, a lot of apricots that I need to prepare so that I can have them for next year, for spring next year. I am way behind, so I'm trying to push because of the storm. A lot of the areas, the roads have been blocked. Still, some of them still not clear. So there are some challenges. But I want to say, pay attention to your colonies. Remove from the colonies frames that are not covered. Ensure that you feed religiously. Develop a feeding plan, which is important for this time of the year. You need to have a feeding plan. How we are going to feed each apiary, each bee yard. What is your timeline for each bee yard? Develop a feeding plan and ensure that you try your best to stick to that feeding plan. It has to be a critical part of your strategy, your overwintering strategy. Make sure your sugar syrup is balanced. The amount that you are giving to each colony is balanced based on the colony's ability to absorb it within a certain time, that sugar syrup does not ferment, and then the bees will not take it. So pay attention to these little things that are critical for overwintering. This bee yard is going to be cut sometime this week, but have your bee yard clean. At this time of the year, that's a critical part of overwintering. Make sure that your bee yard is clean, low-cut bee yard, and properly maintained. Also, it is important to pay attention to what is happening at each bee yard. Don't have a universal approach to your beekeeping. So one bee yard, you might not need to use entrance reducer, but another bee yard, you might very well need to use entrance reducer. So let me give you a peep in on what my entrance reducer looks like. So this is my entrance reducer. This is it. So I have a 1-inch hole here, and I have this section. It's about 4 inches. This is my entrance reducer. And so I set it at the mouth of the entrance like this. Here we go. The bees are calm, so I'm not worried about them. There we go. So it would turn like this. And I have no smoker, but the bees are very, very calm. This is A22. It's extremely calm. So that is what my entrance reducer looks like. If I use it at the other end, that is this end, you only have a small entrance. So this is the only hole that they can enter from. But if I turn it this way, then they have that hole, right? So pay attention to these small pieces, and the bees are coming in with pollen. As I said, this is a pollen rich area, so you can just pay attention to this, to all of that, right? So keep you posted. We'll talk.